Welcome to the Author's Den, a place where we encourage reading and writing, a place where you can meet authors and book illustrators, a place to get your questions answered about writing, publishing, and promoting your book. Well, hello and welcome to the Author's Den. My name is Mike Talley, and with me today is my guest, Dr. Henry Sonenshein, who's written the book, A Scar is Born, Memoirs of a Surgeon. Doctor, thanks for being with us today. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your career, what you're doing with yourself now.
Well, I'm originally from Brooklyn, New York, and I went to school in Iowa, College of Osteopathic Medicine and Surgery. I then decided to specialize, and as the book talks about, early on I interned in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, which was a very nice, moderate-sized town with a good hospital. From there, I went on to take a residency in ear, nose, and throat and orofacial plastic surgery. I took many other graduate courses and postgraduate courses, and I became certified in that area. And I was double boarded in ear, nose, and throat and facial plastic surgery. I also boarded in case management and things like that, because after I had to retire from practice because of illness, I did some work as a medical consultant for Blue Cross of Michigan. Talk about your first attempts at writing. Did you write poetry, medical journal entries? What did you do? I wrote, I actually have had 28 articles, medical articles, most of them original papers published during my time in practice, because during that time I was also a resident trainer. I was also a full professor at Michigan State Osteopathic College of Medicine and Surgery. So I was exposed to a lot of cases that I thought should be reported, and I wrote those. But at a really early age, actually at the age of about 59 and a half, I became fairly ill with leukemia. The outcome at that time wasn't very good because there weren't a lot of new treatments out, and I was told I had like 18 months to live. So I did give up practicing actively patient care at that time, and then I went into, I have to have something to do at the time, so I decided to go to some of the local colleges. I took a couple of creative writing courses. I have never done any creative writing before. Then started writing a little bit every day. Then I read something about senior citizen writing concept tests, and there was one at Wayne State, the advanced age kind of a thing. And I entered it, and there were 5 winners, and I was one of them. And I got up there and read my paper, and it was very well received. There was a big crowd, maybe 300 people. And people came over to me and talked to me and said, "That's wonderful, you have any other stories like that?" So I said yes. And this was a story about life with my grandmother when I was growing up in the 50s and 60s, 40s even, in Brooklyn. She was an interesting lady, very strong, compassionate, very well directing person. And I wrote that story about there, and I decided that maybe I will put a book together. So the first book I put together was called Silverware Grows in Her Garden, and it was stories about that time.
Tell us some more about that first book.
She was a Jewish and fairly religious, and in her home she always had 2 sets of dishes and 2 sets of silverware. She had a special set of silverware for meat only and for dairy only, and you couldn't mix the two. And if somebody would go ahead and touch the meat fork with a dairy fork, for example, she'd grab it and say a prayer and wash it in hot water and take it and bury it in the backyard for a fortnight, supposedly to cure it, so that she could again use it in the right areas. But, and I just said, as the story ends, the punchline of that story is, while the time I was growing up, when I was young, I always thought my grandmother grew silverware in her backyard, and that's where the name of that book came from. When they got older, they came and they moved in with us. And when she came, they brought certain things. I call that story the things they carried. But she brought a samovar, you know, that the old beautiful things from Russia they used to make tea in. And she brought books and things like that. But one thing she brought was 2 bricks, 2 regular building bricks. And I couldn't understand that. But finally, one day, I said to her, "Why do you have books?" She would say with her little accent, she talked with the lexicon of the European Jew. She said, "Well, you know, I'm not long in this country." And she meant by that, she was short, she was 5 foot tall. She says, "So I have the bricks so I shouldn't drown." I said, "What do you mean so you shouldn't drown?" She says, "Even I take a bath." She says, "I put the 2 bricks in, and I put my feet against them." She said, "If it wasn't for the bricks, I'd slide under the water, I'd drown." So that's the story. That story, and that's basically the flavor of that first book.
What role did reading play when you were growing up?
You know, my mother was a reader. It was interesting at the time, and my father not particularly. And I became a reader because we were taken to the library. And we would sit and we had radio, of course, but there wasn't. We couldn't afford television at the time, so it was a good way to get into the worlds that I couldn't see in person, so to speak. So I read probably more than the average kid, but not anything unusually heavy.
As a child, did you read a lot? Did you have a favorite author or favorite books?
Well, of course, we all read like the Hardy Boys and adventure stories. And there were, I'm trying to think of who my favorite writers were at the time, but there were often things featured at the library, and the librarians were friendly and would say, "Read this book" or something, and we would, and things like that. Poetry was also taught in the schools, and I was a little bit interested in it. I've committed things in the old days meaning in 60 years ago, 50 years ago when I was in school, like the poem by Robert W. Service, and who I liked. He wrote books like The Face on a Bar, poems like The Face on a Barroom Floor, and A Young Fellow, My Lad, and things like that, and of course Kipling. I have all those. If you want me, I can give them to you. Where are you going, you fellow, my lad, in this glittering morn in May? For some reason, I've been able to retain most of those poems.
Your book took place 30, 40 years ago in the 60s during your internship and residency. Why did you choose to talk about that time period?
Well, this is, 40 years ago. It's stories about internship and residency, which I had, at a time when intern and residency was different than it is now. I'm not saying they don't learn more. I'm not saying their exposure is different now. But we did things like, as an intern, we rode the ambulance. If they asked for a doctor on ambulance, the intern got into the ambulance and made a house call. And income at that time. When I was a resident, I had a wife and 2 children. And by the way, I was already married and had 1 child when I first started school, so it made it a little more difficult. We were only getting maybe $3,000 a year, I'm not sure exactly now. But the government came out with a survey and said that anybody making below the $3,000 income level could be considered poverty. So all the residents in the hospital were making less than that, and all the hospitals around, we got together and we decided that we were going to tell them that we would go on strike, and of course we never would have, but we would go on strike unless we got above the poverty level. So it made the newspapers, and it was on television, and early television in those days. So the hospitals all got together and they gave us a raise, and they gave us like $30, $40 raise a month, which brought us above $3,000, just barely, and we had to keep quiet. So things were different.
Once again, how long did it take to actually write the book? Did you Did you have memories a diary that you referred to?
As I said, I sat there many hours with nothing to do. And what I did was make a list of things I thought were funny and then thought about the stories about them. Everything in this book really happened. Could I tell you word for word it was like that? Of course not, but things like this really happened.
Humor runs throughout your book. That must be part of your personality. Tell us a couple anecdotes from the book.
The basis for that is the thing I always told my students when I had them, and I always believed, and that is this: take what you do seriously. Don't take yourself too seriously. I think it helped me through life, through many diseased years, that I don't take myself too seriously, but I sure did take what I did seriously.
Your book is full of anecdotes about coworkers and patients, doctors. Talk a little bit about some of them.
I had mentors and I had tormentors. I had guys that would do anything to teach you, not only medical and surgical things, but life in general. And I had guys that were just a royal pain in the behind. I had my trainer was, the head trainer was terrific. The head of the department was difficult, to say the least. Oh, I'll give you an example is that he would take his shoes off and shine them each time when we go into the locker room to change for surgery, and put him in a corner and take out his surgical shoes. At that time we didn't use surgical covers, we used white shoes. And he'd clean those too. And then I'd say to him, you know what, Alvin, which is his first name, you know what, Alvin? He said, if I were you, I'd cover those shoes when I put them in the locker because they can get a little dusty. And the next day I came in, he had shoe covers on him, things. That was his prison. But I got him to start changing his way of being more casual and things like that. They said, we're going to change you, the guys in the department. They said, we'll make you more like, you know, like we are. And then just at the very end, when I was about to graduate, they said, congratulations. We said, every day we got more like you were. So I guess I was as good an influence on them as they were, or bad an influence on them as they were on me.
Why did you write about this time of your life?
I think that the life that an intern and resident faces today, it was so much different. The contrast was so much different. They no longer, or seldom, have they 36 hours on and 12 hours off like we used to have. You know, we used to work straight, stay at the hospital, things like that. It was grueling. You learned a lot because you got to follow the same patient all the way along for all the time, but probably unnecessary. It was a prerequisite to be so tired you couldn't stand in those days. Today, training is more technical, but it was a difference, and I wanted to talk about that difference. Again,
I really enjoyed the stories in the book. Talk to us about the house calls that you made while you were in New Jersey.
Because I had to make some extra money. I had a wife and children, because when I was an intern, the second child was born. And this was as a resident, of course, not as an internship. So that in evenings, I signed up to make house calls. I went with an answering service that would give me a call. We made $3 a house call. If it was after 10 p.m., though, they'd pay $4 a house call. I went out one Sunday afternoon when I was off. I got a call to go see this lady. And as I approached the house, there were just many people on the porch, all dressed like for Sunday services. And I go into the house and I said, where's the patient? I said, I'm the doctor, where's the patient? And they said, you can't go in now, the saint is with Mama. And I said, the saint? And she says, yes, the saint, she's praying for her. And I look in the door and they have this very, very big, she happened to be a black woman dressed all in white, white shoes, white gown, white veil. and she's holding this lady who couldn't breathe at all, obviously in congestive heart failure. She's holding her up and saying some incantations over her. And I said, look, she doesn't look good, you better let me in the room. And they said, no, you'll spoil the spell. Finally, one son said, you better let him go in and see her. So they let me go in, and she was in congestive failure, and I gave her the appropriate medications and stayed with her for a long time. And she came around a little bit, and then I said, well, you can watch her for a while, but if it gets worse, don't just take her right, or call right for the hospital. Well, they said okay, and they thanked me, and they said, and gave me my fee, which because of all the medication at the time was going to be $6. They said, well, we don't have any money, we just gave it all to the saints. So I said, what do you mean? I said, you know, and I wasn't mean about money, but this seemed a little strange to me. They said, the only thing we got is a bunch of pennies here, that we save pennies. I said, well, that's okay. I said, so I left the house with my pants being pulled down with 600 pennies, and that was, and that's one of the house stories. My last house call was an interesting and frightening situation. I got called out one day to see this fellow. The call said that he was acting strangely. I walked into the house, and there's a little bit of yelling going on, and then the wife comes to the door and says, you got to do something. My husband's got a gun. He's going to shoot something or somebody. So I walked in, there was a guy sitting there with a gun. And if you haven't not used to seeing guns, this looked like a cannon. And I said to him, what are you doing? And he just picked the gun up and pointed it right at me and said, I'm going to shoot you. I said, what do you know? I said, you don't even know me. Don't shoot me. Shoot the television set. And he turned around and shot the television set. The thing exploded. I turned, ran down the steps, ran into the car, ran home looking white, I'm sure, and of course called the police, but they had heard the shot and had already gone there. And I said, you know what? The $3 to $5, $6 are not worth it. And I was almost finished with my residency anyway. But I probably lost 4 or 5 years of my life that day.
Tell us a little bit about the publishing process. I know that's unique to every author that I've spoken with. What did you have to go through to get your book published?
The first book, because it was all kind of a spur-of-the-moment thing, I looked for a local publisher. Why? Well, number one, I was just coming out of this disease state, which, although I was doing much better than they predicted, I didn't want to wait to see the name in print. So I went to a local publisher, I think it was J&M Publishers. For this book, I did all the editing, all the writing. I mean, I had friends read it, and of course I gave them credit for that. But nothing was really done on a highly professional basis. But it came out very professional, I think. I sold a great many of those books. I wish, I just only hope that this book will sell as well, because it was for a certain niche, although this book might be also, it was a certain niche of people because it talked about their family. And whether you were Jewish or Italian or Polish, everybody had a family who had a grandmother like that. So interesting enough, I had a friend that was Puerto Rican and grew up in Puerto Rico, and he bought that book and ordered some to send to all these people in Puerto Rico. I never would have believed it, because I said, why are you so interested? He said, it's just like my Puerto Rican grandmother. So that publishing was all done on my own, basically. And I did the editing and the setting up, and I had friends, a lady friend help me do that. The Scar is Born, I went to what they may call it's a professional publishing company, although I did pay for the part of the processing. A vanity press. And but they do go over the book, and they do say whether they'll accept it or not, and they did. I also had a friend named David Hurley who lives here in Southfield, who did the editing for me. He did a wonderful job.
Well, tell us about the cover design. How did that come about? Did you have any input into it?
Well, interesting enough, when I was working at Blue Cross, the fellow who was my director was into art. And I wanted something whimsical, and I look at it, maybe it's not whimsical enough. And I said to him, Stephen, draw a cover for me. And I gave him, I want it by next weekend, you know, that didn't help it. And I didn't want it to be, I wanted it to be a little bit kind of funny. It didn't come out, it comes a little gruesome when you look at it, but that works too. So this was all from one idea I had and one picture. I really wanted to have a picture of the back cover also, showing the back of me with my fingers crossed in the back. But unfortunately, that picture didn't come out.
What are you doing to promote the book? Are you doing any book fairs, signing? If someone wants to find your book, where can they go to purchase a copy of your book?
When you go to this publishing company, they will sell you a package. That package puts you on like Amazon.com, Barnes & Nobles. You can order the books from all these people, so that's one thing. Last month, every 3 months, they send you an accounting, and I didn't do very well with them, but on my own, I had, during this promotion, I had postcards which has a picture of the cover of the book, and I said, you know, it's a book of insightful and humorous situations that occurred during, and that I think you would enjoy reading. And then the last line I said, hey, if you wrote a book, I'd read it. And I sent these postcards, sent out about 200 of them to people that I knew. I probably sold, well, I've sold 210 books so far. As in the first book, which I did extremely well with, I went to the Jewish Community Center when they had the local author book show. I did well with that. This year I was in the hospital during that time, so I couldn't do that. But if a book's published within 2 years of the time, those first 2 years it's published, you can go into the show. So I intend to do that then. I'm going to an ear, nose, and throat convention in a couple of weeks. I've already sent to the secretary of the college a printed form which he's going to put in everybody's folder for me, stating how they can get the book and where. And that's what I've done so far. It's interesting how many people you know that say, I'm going to write a book. And it's interesting how few of us do. Is it an ego thing? Yeah, you bet. But it's so nice to see, even if you did a lot of the publishing yourself, it's so nice to see your name in print.
Talk about the Dr. J's.
Well, that was an interesting thing. There was really 3 Dr. J's. When I first got into making house calls and I met this lady who ran this answering service, we became very fine friends. She would give me a call every once in a while, and I'd go make it, and $3 to $4 a night was good. And then I'd make 2, and finally, the people that I was covering, and the answering service liked me because the service, I guess, was good, and I didn't rub out too many people. They started giving me more. Well, you know, I was in a residency, and you didn't have all that much time. So I spoke with 2 other residents that we worked with, and we decided that we made up a name, which was Dr. J, just because that was the thing we chose. And we would share that name so that if they'd call and I couldn't get out, or if I was at the hospital, I'd call Dr. J number 2. Dr. J would go to the house and see these people as a house call, and of course that was his fee to keep. But the funny thing is sometimes you'd go back to the house and they'd say, "You're not the Dr. J I saw the other day?" And I'd say, "No, that's my brother." And this guy was one was 6'3" or something, and a big guy, and the other guy was this guy who was a pediatrician, pediatrics resident, was about 5'7", and they just had trouble putting that together. But that's the genesis and how it worked with Dr. J.
Again, there were so many great stories in the book. Talk a little bit about the shark episode.
I, being from Brooklyn, never did much shark fishing. So these fellows, experienced fishermen, said to me, and both of them were interns, I was a resident, let's go shark fishing. I said, yeah, sure, why not? We met this early morning and we went way out to Delaware, which was not, I mean, we were in New Jersey at this time. And we expected to rent a bigger boat, but there were none left when we got there. So we rented this 14-foot rowboat with a motor. And this one fella, Charlie, had all the fishing gear you could probably think of. He was an experienced fisherman. And we went out into the Delaware Bay, and we took I say we because he knew all about this and I was just kind of there. He took a big metal beer barrel as the float. We had this 95-pound test wire and line he put on an end of this rod. We had 2 rods, and threw out in the water, and then we went fishing for some real small fish, which we caught almost immediately. And you kind of cut them up a little and put them on the end of this giant hook and let it out on the barrel. And in a little while, we got this pull on the line, and the guy, and we said, we got a shark. Well, Charlie says, let it play itself out. So the shark is towing us, and he tows us way out. But finally, the boat stops being towed. So Charlie says, let's pull, and he has a 22 gauge rifle, which I don't even know he has with him. He said, let's pull the line in. And we pull the line in, he's pulling and pulling, and all of a sudden, out of the water comes this big shark right at the boat. So I have a gaff in my hand. I use it to push the thing away, and that snaps, and then we pick up an oar and try to push it away. And over my ear, an inch, I had these 3 gigantic blasts. He took the shotgun, and it was a rifle. He took a rifle and shot the shark, and of course that stopped it. Now we got a bleeding shark in an area where there's sharks. So we, having no sense at the time, decide we should take it into the boat. The shark is 9.5 foot. It weighs, I forget how many pounds, but many. You'll see a picture of the newspaper article about it. And we finally get into the boat, and it breaks the rims in the boat. We get it over the gunwale, and then we have to sit on it. And I don't remember any other sharks coming around. And now we start back. And of course, you know, we brought sandwiches and stuff, which we all ate practically on our way to the thing. So we're stuck out there hours and hours trying to get back because we run out of gas. And finally, we get the boat in with 1 oar because we broke the other one. And finally, a Coast Guard cutter picks us up and takes us home and back to shore. And it was crazy. And people, because we weren't any people, local people came and took chunks of the shark meat to eat. And Charlie wanted the jaws, so he cut the jaws off and took that, and we had that in the back of the car on the way home. And of course, everybody was looking for us. And my wife thought I was crazy. I was burnt to a crisp. Couldn't get any sympathy from anybody because of it. And that was an adventure amongst others. It's an adventure to write a book. It takes a lot of guts to throw out the stuff that you want in, but it doesn't really fit. That book was half again as big when I went to the last couple of editing sessions. Everybody has good stories in their background. I think I picked a niche because I think I do memoirs better than others, than mysteries, for example.